The echoes of the bonding ritual still lingered in the corridors of the palace, whispers trailing behind every step Lyra took. She had survived the public gaze, endured the tests of loyalty and cunning, but the court was far from convinced. Blackwood's smile in the shadows promised that the real trial was yet to come. Even Kieran's steady presence beside her could not erase the weight of what was demanded next, a combat challenge she had never trained for. Marcus had sworn to stand as her shield, but in the king's court, victory was rarely won with strength alone. This morning would decide whether she was truly meant to stand at Kieran's side, or be cast aside like so many before her. Lyra felt physically sick as she contemplated the harsh reality before her. The law was absolutely clear. Theft was punishable by flogging and imprisonment, regardless of circumstances. But how could any civilized person order a pregnant woman flogged for the crime of trying to feed herself and her unborn child? "Master Willem?" she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent square. "Before I render judgment, I must ask, what would justice look like to you in this case?" The baker shifted uncomfortably. "The law is the law, my lady. She stole from me." "She did," Lyra agreed, "and the law demands punishment. But the law also serves justice, and justice without mercy is merely cruelty." She turned to address the wider crowd. "This woman's husband died in the mines that profit their owners while providing no protection or compensation for the workers who die in their depths. She sought help from our charitable institutions, but was denied for lack of proper documentation." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many had lost family to the mines. "So I ask again," Lyra continued, returning her attention to the baker. "What would justice look like? Would flogging this pregnant widow return your bread? Would imprisoning her feed her unborn child? Or would it simply add more suffering to a world that already has too much?" Master Willem's stern expression wavered. I work hard for my living, my lady. If everyone who was hungry simply took, then perhaps we should ask why so many are hungry." Lyra interrupted gently. "But that is a larger question for another day. Today, we must deal with Elena." She stood, descending from the platform to approach the trembling young woman. "Elena, if given the chance, would you work to repay what you've taken?" "Yes, my lady," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Anything. I'll do anything." Lyra turned back to Master Willem. "I propose an alternative resolution. Elena will work in your bakery for 6 months, receiving fair wages and 2 meals per day. The cost of the stolen bread and any future bread she might need will be deducted from her wages at a rate that allows her to still support herself. After her child is born, if both parties are satisfied, she may continue the employment permanently." "But the law," Duke Blackwood began. "The law allows for judicial discretion in cases of exceptional circumstance," Lyra said firmly. "A pregnant widow with no family and no support certainly qualifies. Furthermore, I'm establishing a new precedent. When someone steals necessities out of genuine desperation rather than greed, they will be offered the chance to work off their debt rather than face physical punishment." She looked directly at Duke Blackwood as she added, "And I'm calling for immediate investigation into the mining company's practice of abandoning the families of workers killed in their service. No widow should have to choose between stealing and starving." The crowd erupted in mixed reactions, approval from the common folk, concern from some nobles. Master Willem looked between Elena and Lyra, clearly wrestling with the decision. I accept this judgment, he finally said. The girl may work for me as you've described. Thank you, Elena sobbed, falling to her knees. Thank you, my lady. Lyra helped her to her feet. Save your gratitude for Master Willem. He's giving you a chance. Don't waste it. As the baker's wife led Elena away, looking considerably more sympathetic than her husband, Duke Blackwood stood abruptly. The third scenario, he announced, his voice sharp with barely controlled anger. This one will truly test your judgment, Lady Lyra. Guards brought forward 4 young nobles in chains. Lyra's heart sank as she recognized Lord Marcus Thornfield among them. His usual easy confidence was intact, but she could see concern in his green eyes. These 4 stand accused of high treason, Duke Blackwood announced with obvious satisfaction. They were caught with documents detailing plans to sell kingdom secrets to our enemies in the Eastern Territories. The evidence is irrefutable. Letters in their own hands, discussing troop movements, fortification weaknesses, and trade route intelligence. The crowd's sympathetic mood evaporated instantly. Treason was the ultimate betrayal, punishable only by death. Lyra studied Marcus's face intently, remembering his kindness, his warnings about court dangers. Every instinct screamed this was wrong. Present the evidence, she commanded. The letters were brought forward in an ornate box. Lyra studied them carefully, her years of copying texts for the Omega House serving her well. The handwriting appeared to be Marcus's, the content thoroughly damning. But something nagged at her, a falseness she couldn't quite identify. Lord Marcus, she said carefully, these letters are dated over the past 3 months. Can you account for your whereabouts during this time? On diplomatic mission to the Eastern Territories, my lady, by order of His Majesty. I returned only yesterday. Duke Blackwood's smirk widened. So you admit you were in enemy territory when these treasonous letters were written? On official kingdom business, Marcus replied calmly. With full diplomatic papers and royal escort. My mission was to negotiate new trade agreements, which I completed successfully. Lyra continued examining the letters, then looked up sharply. Lord Marcus, do you suffer from any injuries to your writing hand? Marcus looked surprised. I broke 2 fingers in a training accident 5 weeks ago. They're still splinted, as you can see. He raised his right hand, showing the obvious injury. Yet these letters dated from 3 weeks ago show perfect penmanship, Lyra observed. No variation that would indicate injury. Duke Blackwood, how do you explain this? The Duke's expression tightened. The accused is obviously lying about his injury. The injury that multiple witnesses can verify? Lyra pressed. Furthermore, all these letters use identical ink, identical parchment. Letters written over 3 months would show natural variation. Different ink batches, paper from different sources. These were all written recently, at the same time. She held up one particular letter. But most damning to your case, Duke Blackwood, this letter discusses the new Eastern fortifications. Fortifications that were only approved by the Royal Council 2 weeks ago. How could Lord Marcus have written about them 3 months past? The crowd began murmuring excitedly. Lord Pemberton, sitting with the council, shifted uncomfortably. I find Lord Marcus Thornfield and his companions innocent of all charges, Lyra declared. These letters are recent forgeries, created to entrap innocent men. I call for immediate investigation into who created these false documents and why. You exceed your authority, Duke Blackwood snarled. I exercise the judgment you asked me to demonstrate, Lyra replied coolly. Unless you'd prefer I find them guilty based on obviously forged evidence? I'm sure the king would be very interested to know his council tried to execute innocent nobles based on false documents. The threat hung in the air. Duke Blackwood's face had turned an alarming shade of purple, while Lord Pemberton looked genuinely worried. Release them! Duke Blackwood commanded through gritted teeth. As the guards removed the chains, Marcus caught Lyra's eye and bowed deeply, genuine gratitude replacing his usual sardonic expression. The council will deliberate on today's proceedings, Duke Blackwood announced stiffly. We will announce our decision this evening. As the crowd began to disperse, Lyra remained seated, exhaustion washing over her. She'd passed the trial of compassion, but at what cost? She'd made enemies today, powerful ones. That was brilliantly done, a familiar voice said softly. She looked up to find Kieran approaching, his expression mixing pride with concern. You're not supposed to interfere with the trials, she reminded him weakly. I'm not interfering. I'm simply walking through the square and happening to encounter my mate. He sat beside her, careful not to touch. Even that might be seen as influence. The forgery investigation was inspired. How did you know? The ink was too fresh, Lyra explained, and the handwriting was too perfect, like someone carefully copying rather than naturally writing. I've done enough copying work to recognize the difference. Duke Blackwood underestimated you. He's not done yet, Lyra said quietly. Tomorrow's combat trial. He'll have something planned. Sir Garrett Blackstone has been named as the crown's champion, Kieran confirmed grimly. He's never lost a formal combat. He's known for his brutality. Then I need to find a champion of my own, Lyra said, though she had no idea who would risk their life for a forgotten Omega-turned-controversial queen candidate. You'll find one, Kieran said with quiet confidence. After today's display, I suspect you'll have volunteers. As they parted, separately, to avoid any appearance of impropriety, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest trial was yet to come. Duke Blackwood's fury had been palpable. Whatever he had planned for tomorrow, it would be designed to ensure she failed. But as she walked back to the palace, she noticed something that gave her hope. Common folk approached her, bowing deeply, murmuring thanks. Some pressed small tokens into her hands. A flower, a carved wooden phoenix, a child's drawing of a crowned figure standing up to a dragon labeled Bad Duke. You spoke for us, an elderly woman said, tears in her eyes. No noble ever speaks for us. You saw the truth, a young man added. Lord Marcus helped my village during the drought. We knew he was no traitor. By the time she reached the palace, Lyra had collected dozens of small tributes and countless whispered thanks. Lord Aldrich met her at the entrance, his expression unreadable. Your Majesty wishes to speak with you, he said formally. Privately, in his study. Lyra's heart raced. Had she overstepped? Would Kieran withdraw his claim? But when she entered the study, Kieran's expression was warm with pride. You were magnificent today. The way you handled each scenario, especially Duke Blackwood's trap. I may have made things worse, Lyra admitted. He was furious. He was exposed, Kieran corrected. His plan to frame Marcus failed because he underestimated you. But Lyra, his expression grew serious. Tomorrow will be dangerous. Blackstone doesn't just defeat opponents, he destroys them. And Duke Blackwood will ensure the combat is as brutal as possible. Then I need the best champion available, Lyra said with more confidence than she felt. You'll have one, a new voice said from the doorway. Lord Marcus entered, still rubbing his wrists where the chains had been. Lady Lyra, you saved my life today. Allow me to return the favor. Marcus, no, Kieran said immediately. Blackstone will try to kill me? Probably. Marcus shrugged with his characteristic nonchalance, though Lyra could see the seriousness in his eyes. But I'm not without skill. And more importantly, I'm not without motivation. Lyra proved today that she'll be a queen who values justice over politics, truth over convenience. That's worth fighting for. I can't ask this of you, Lyra protested. You're not asking, I'm offering. His grin turned sharp. Besides, I owe Duke Blackwood for trying to frame me. What better revenge than defeating his chosen champion? After Marcus left, Kieran pulled Lyra into his arms. Protocol be damned. I'm proud of you, he murmured, but I'm also terrified. If something happens tomorrow, then we face it together, Lyra said, echoing his words from days ago. That's what mates do. They stood together in the gathering dusk, both knowing that tomorrow would bring either triumph or tragedy. The combat trial would determine not just Lyra's worthiness, but the future of the kingdom itself. Outside, the common folk were still celebrating their queen candidate who'd stood for justice. Inside the palace, nobles whispered and plotted. And somewhere in the shadows, Duke Blackwood planned his final move. The forgotten Omega had passed 2 trials. One more stood between her and a crown. But it would be the deadliest of all. Dawn broke gray and ominous over the kingdom, matching the dread that had kept Lyra awake through the night. She stood at her window in the Luna suite, watching servants prepare the combat platform in the courtyard below. The massive structure dominated the space, surrounded by tiered seating that was already beginning to fill despite the early hour. You didn't sleep, Kieran observed from the doorway. She turned to face him, seeing her own exhaustion mirrored in his features. Neither did you. He crossed to her in 3 quick strides, pulling her into his arms. How could I? Knowing what you faced today, knowing I can't protect you. Marcus will protect me, she said, trying to inject confidence into her voice. Marcus is skilled, but Blackstone is a killer. Kieran's arms tightened around her. If I could take his place, the law forbids it, she finished. Mates cannot champion each other in these trials. A soft knock interrupted them. Lady Meredith entered, followed by Lady Celeste and Vivian. Over the past days, Lyra had grown to appreciate their different strengths. Meredith's surprising courage, Celeste's political acumen despite her calculating nature, and Vivian's sharp intelligence. My lady, Meredith said gently, we've come to help you prepare. As her ladies-in-waiting dressed her in deep purple, the color of royalty and mourning both, Celeste spoke carefully. The entire court is talking about yesterday's trial. You've made quite an impression. Good or bad? Lyra asked. Both, Vivian answered honestly. The common folk see you as their champion. Many nobles are reconsidering their positions. And Duke Blackwood? The three women exchanged glances. Furious, Celeste admitted. He spent the night in conference with Lord Pemberton and others. They're planning something. Before Lyra could respond, Lord Aldrich appeared at the door. The king's chief advisor looked troubled. Your presence is requested in the small council chamber, my lady. Lord Marcus wishes to speak with you before the combat. Lyra found Marcus in the chamber, already dressed in lighter armor that would allow for quick movement. Gone was his usual casual demeanor. He looked focused, deadly serious. Are you certain about this? She asked without preamble. Completely. He tested the balance of his sword with practiced ease. I've been training since childhood, you know. The wastrel courtier persona is partly protective coloring. Why hide your skills? Because in this court, it's often safer to be underestimated. His expression grew grim. Blackstone won't make that mistake. He studied every fighter in the kingdom. He knows I'm competent. Then why? Because someone needs to stand for you, and I have the best chance. He met her eyes directly. Lyra, what you did yesterday, standing for truth even when it was dangerous, that matters. This kingdom needs a queen who values justice over politics. I'm just an Omega who got lucky, Lyra said, old insecurities surfacing. No, Marcus said firmly. You're an Omega who refused to be invisible, who turned disadvantage into strength, who sees people others overlook. He managed his familiar grin. Besides, after you saved me from Duke Blackwood's frame job, I owe you a life debt. You owe me nothing. I owe you everything, but we can debate that after I win. He bowed formally. Now go. The combat begins soon, and you need to look every inch the future queen. The arena was packed beyond capacity. Every noble in the kingdom seemed to have come, along with thousands of common folk who filled every available space. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and dread. Lyra took her place in the royal box, Kieran beside her, their hands carefully not touching to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Her three ladies-in-waiting stood behind her, a show of support. Lord Aldrich sat to Kieran's other side, his expression neutral as always. Duke Blackwood rose to address the crowd, satisfaction poorly concealed in his bearing. Lord Pemberton watched from his council seat with cold calculation. Lords and ladies, Duke Blackwood announced, his voice carrying easily. We gather for the final trial, combat, to prove that our future queen has the strength to defend the kingdom's honor. The crowd stirred as Sir Garrett Blackstone entered the arena. Lyra's heart sank at the sight of him. He was massive, taller even than Kieran, with muscles that strained against his heavy armor. Scars covered his exposed skin, testament to countless brutal victories. His reputation preceded him. A man who didn't just defeat opponents, but destroyed them, who took pleasure in violence. When Blackstone looked toward the royal box, Lyra saw hunger in his eyes, not for her, but for the carnage to come. As the crown's champion, Duke Blackwood continued, clearly savoring the moment, Sir Garrett Blackstone will face whoever Lady Lyra has chosen to defend her claim. Marcus entered from the opposite side, and the contrast was stark. Next to Blackstone's bulk, he looked almost fragile. But Lyra noticed things others might miss. The perfect balance in his stance, the easy way he carried his sword, the calm focus that spoke of real skill rather than mere training. "Lord Marcus Thornfield stands as my champion," Lyra announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The court libertine against our greatest warrior?" Duke Blackwood said loudly enough for all to hear. "This should be brief." Blackstone laughed, the sound like grinding stone. "Ready to die for your Omega whore, Thornfield?" The insult made Kieran surge to his feet, but Lyra caught his arm. They couldn't show weakness now. Marcus's expression didn't change. "Are you ready to stop talking and fight? Or do you plan to bore me to death with your crude attempts at wit?" The crowd chuckled nervously. Even facing death, Marcus maintained his characteristic sharp tongue. "The combat continues until one yields or dies," Duke Blackwood announced with relish. "Begin!" Blackstone charged immediately, his massive sword cleaving the air with deadly force. But Marcus was already moving, spinning aside with fluid grace. As Blackstone's momentum carried him past, Marcus's blade flicked out, scoring a thin line across the larger man's arm. "First blood to Lord Marcus!" someone in the crowd called. Blackstone wheeled with surprising speed for his size, his face darkening with rage. "Lucky hit, Peacock! You won't get another!" What followed was a deadly dance. Blackstone attacked with devastating power, strikes that shattered the wooden barriers when they missed, blows that would crush bones if they connected. But Marcus refused to meet strength with strength. He redirected, deflected, danced away, making the larger man work for every attack. "Stand and fight, coward!" Blackstone roared after several frustrating minutes. "I am fighting," Marcus replied calmly, adding another small cut to Blackstone's collection. "Just efficiently. Why exhaust myself matching your brute force when I can let you tire yourself out?" The crowd began to murmur. This wasn't the quick execution they'd expected. Marcus was implementing a clear strategy, using Blackstone's size and heavy armor against him, forcing him to chase, making him work. Lady Vivian leaned forward. "He's trained in the Eastern style?" she murmured to Lyra. "Efficiency over power, precision over force." But Blackstone hadn't become the kingdom's deadliest warrior through strength alone. He began adapting, cutting off Marcus's escape routes, using the arena's boundaries to trap him. "He's learning Marcus's patterns," Celeste observed, worry creeping into her usually controlled voice. Indeed, Blackstone was slowly but steadily cornering Marcus, forcing him toward the platform's edge where mobility would be limited. The crowd held its breath as the space for maneuvering shrank. Then disaster struck. Marcus, dodging another massive swing, stepped in a patch of blood from their earlier exchanges. His foot slipped just slightly, but it was enough. Blackstone's sword caught him across the ribs, sending him spinning to the ground. "No!" The word tore from Lyra's throat before she could stop it. Blood spread across Marcus's shirt as he rolled desperately away from Blackstone's follow-up strike. The massive sword slammed into the platform where he'd been, sending splinters flying. "Now you die, pretty boy!" Blackstone snarled, advancing on the wounded man. Marcus struggled to his feet, switching his sword to his left hand. His right arm hung uselessly, blood dripping from his fingers. "Marcus yields!" Lyra started to shout, but Kieran grabbed her arm. "He has to say it himself," he said grimly. "And look at him. He won't." Indeed, Marcus raised his sword again, eyes blazing with determination despite the pain. "Not finished yet." Blackstone laughed cruelly. "No, but you will be soon." He raised his massive sword for a killing blow, and Marcus moved, not away, but forward inside Blackstone's guard. It was a desperate gambit. If it failed, he'd be completely defenseless. But Marcus's blade found its target, sliding between armor plates with surgical precision. For a moment, they stood frozen. Marcus's sword buried in Blackstone's side. Blackstone's sword raised, but unable to complete its arc. Then Blackstone's eyes widened in shock. He dropped his weapon, falling to his knees. "I yield," he gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. The arena erupted. Marcus staggered back, barely keeping his feet, as healers rushed onto the platform. But his eyes found Lyra's across the distance, and he managed a weak smile before his legs gave out entirely. "Lord Marcus is victorious," the herald announced over the chaos. "Lady Lyra has passed the trial by combat." Relief flooded through Lyra so powerfully she swayed. Meredith steadied her as healers worked frantically on both wounded champions. But Duke Blackwood wasn't finished. As the crowd celebrated Marcus's unlikely victory, the Duke rose with theatrical deliberation. "Impressive," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Most impressive. However, there remains one final matter." Lyra's stomach dropped. What more could he demand? "The test of worthiness is complete," Kieran said sharply, rising from his seat. "3 trials, as ancient law demands." "Indeed," Duke Blackwood agreed smoothly. "The 3 trials of ability are complete, but there is an additional provision, rarely invoked but legally binding, that may be demanded when the royal succession is in question." He paused, clearly savoring the confusion rippling through the crowd. Even Lord Aldrich looked uncertain. "The test of blood," Duke Blackwood announced. "Not the blood of combat, but the blood that ensures our kingdom's future." "Explain yourself," Kieran commanded, his voice dangerous. "It's quite simple," Duke Blackwood said, turning to address the entire assembly. "Our investigation into Lady Lyra's background revealed some concerning information. She was previously mated for 5 years. 5 years without producing a single heir." The words hit Lyra like physical blows. The shame she'd carried for years, the secret pain of her barrenness, was being exposed before thousands. She heard gasps from the crowd, saw the way people looked at her change. "A barren queen cannot secure the succession," Duke Blackwood continued ruthlessly. "The test of blood demands proof that she can provide heirs. Unless Lady Lyra can demonstrate her fertility—" "Enough!" Kieran's roar silenced the arena. Power radiated from him in almost visible waves. "You dare use such a personal matter as a political weapon?" "I dare speak the truth the kingdom needs to hear," Duke Blackwood countered. "Every noble, every citizen will wonder, can their queen provide the stability of succession? It's a legitimate concern." Lyra stood on trembling legs. She had to speak, had to defend herself, though the words felt like ash in her mouth. Duke Blackwood speaks truth, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The crowd leaned in to hear. I was mated for 5 years without conceiving. My former mate cast me aside for this failing. The silence was deafening. She saw pity in some faces, disgust in others, calculation in many noble expressions. But I ask you, she continued, finding strength in Kieran's steady presence, is a woman's worth measured only by her womb? Is a queen valued only for the heirs she might produce? That's exactly what a barren woman would say. Someone called from the noble section. The words cut deep, but Lyra raised her chin. Then let me be clear. I cannot promise you heirs. I cannot swear that my body will do what it refused to do for 5 years. But I can promise you this. I will serve this kingdom with every breath in my body, fertile or not. I will fight for justice, for the forgotten, for those who've been told they're worthless. And if the gods see fit to bless me with children, I will raise them to do the same. Pretty words, Duke Blackwood said dismissively. But the succession is my concern. Kieran interrupted. I choose Lyra knowing her history. That should tell you everything about my priorities. But Lyra could see the damage was done. The doubt was planted. Even if she officially passed the trials, she would always be the barren queen, the Omega who couldn't fulfill a woman's most basic purpose. Duke Blackwood smiled, knowing he'd won even in defeat. The council will deliberate on all 3 trials. We will announce our final decision at sunset. As the crowd dispersed, whispers followed Lyra like a curse. Barren. 5 years without conceiving. What kind of queen? Poor king. Lyra fled the arena as soon as protocol allowed, unable to bear the weight of all those judging stares. She ran through the palace corridors, seeking somewhere to hide, somewhere to fall apart without witnesses to her shame. She found herself in the library where she'd first truly spoken with Marcus, collapsing into a chair as sobs racked her body. All the strength she'd shown during the trials meant nothing if she couldn't fulfill the most basic expectation of a queen. Planning to hide here forever? She looked up to find Marcus in the doorway, pale and bandaged, but standing on his own feet. A young healer hovered anxiously behind him. You should be in bed, Lyra said, wiping futilely at her tears. So should you. He waved off the healer and made his way carefully to a chair. That was quite a dramatic revelation Blackwood orchestrated. It wasn't a revelation to me, Lyra said bitterly. I've lived with that shame for years. 5 years of treatments, prayers, remedies, all worthless. I'm as barren as a stone. Marcus studied her with those perceptive green eyes. Tell me about your former mate. Why? So you can pity me too. Humor a wounded man, he said gently. Lyra sighed. Garrett of House Pinehurst, traditional, proud, demanding. He wanted heirs desperately, and I failed him. When he finally cast me aside, he said I was defective merchandise, not fit for anything but the Omega House. Garrett of House Pinehurst, Marcus repeated thoughtfully. Interesting. What's interesting about my humiliation? The Pinehurst line has a reputation, Marcus said carefully. One that's whispered about but never spoken aloud. Tell me, did Garrett remarry after casting you aside? Yes, twice, I heard. Why? Any children from those marriages? Lyra frowned. I don't know. I tried not to think about him after. She stopped, understanding dawning. You're not suggesting the Pinehurst line has struggled with fertility for generations, Marcus said quietly. It's an open secret among the nobility. Garrett's father took 4 wives before managing a single heir. His grandfather, 3 wives. The men of that house are notoriously poor at siring children. But they always blame their wives. The world tilted beneath Lyra's feet. That's not possible, the healers said. What did the healers say? Exactly? Lyra tried to remember through the haze of pain. They said they couldn't find anything wrong with me, but obviously something was wrong. 5 years. 5 years with a man who likely couldn't sire children with anyone. Marcus finished. Lyra, has it occurred to you that the failing might never have been yours? Before she could process this earth-shattering possibility, Kieran appeared in the doorway. His relief at finding her was palpable. Leave us, he told Marcus gently but firmly. Marcus rose carefully. Think about what I said, Lyra. And remember, Duke Blackwood has his own motivations for wanting you to fail. Question everything. When they were alone, Kieran approached slowly, as if she might flee again. Lyra, don't, she interrupted. Don't tell me it doesn't matter. Don't lie to make me feel better. I wasn't going to. He knelt before her chair, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. I was going to say that I meant every word in that arena. I choose you, knowing everything. If we have children, they'll be blessed to have you as a mother. If we don't, then we'll fill our lives with other purposes. Either way, I want you beside me. The kingdom needs heirs. The kingdom needs a queen who understands suffering, who fights for justice, who sees the forgotten. Everything else is secondary. He pressed her hands to his lips. You are not broken, Lyra. You are not worthless. You are mine, and I am yours. And that is enough. She broke down then, sobbing into his shoulder, as years of pain poured out. He held her through it all, murmuring comfort, his presence, an anchor in the storm. When her tears finally slowed, he pulled back to look at her. There's something else. Lord Aldrich has been investigating Duke Blackwood's sudden knowledge of your past. It seems he's been receiving information from someone who knew you before. Who? We're not certain yet. But Lyra, I need you to be strong a little longer. The council meets in an hour. Whatever happens, we face it together. As the sun set, they made their way to the throne room. The entire court had assembled, the atmosphere thick with tension and anticipation. Lyra noticed how the crowd seemed divided, common folk watching her with sympathy and hope, nobles with calculation and judgment. Lady Meredith surprised everyone by approaching Lyra directly. My lady, she said, loud enough for others to hear, I wanted you to know what Duke Blackwood did was cruel and wrong. A woman's worth isn't in her womb. Thank you, Lyra whispered, touched by the unexpected support. Lady Celeste and Vivian flanked her other side, creating a protective formation. Even calculating Celeste seemed offended by Duke Blackwood's tactics. The council filed in with solemn ceremony. Duke Blackwood looked smugly satisfied, while Lord Pemberton appeared troubled. The other 3 council members were harder to read. We have deliberated on the 3 trials, Duke Blackwood announced, clearly having appointed himself spokesperson. And we have reached our decisions. The throne room fell silent. On the trial of wisdom, Lady Lyra demonstrated unexpected intelligence and insight. By a vote of 3-2, she passed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lyra kept her expression neutral, waiting. On the trial of compassion, Lady Lyra showed remarkable judgment and introduced innovative solutions. By a vote of 3-2, she passed. More murmurs, louder now. But Lyra could see the trap in Duke Blackwood's expression. On the trial of combat, Lord Marcus Thornfield emerged victorious as Lady Lyra's champion. This trial was unanimously passed. He paused dramatically. However, he continued, satisfaction dripping from the word, the matter of succession cannot be ignored. A queen who cannot provide heirs endangers the kingdom's future. Therefore, Your Grace, Lord Aldrich interrupted smoothly, stepping forward. Before you continue, perhaps the council should hear some new information that has come to light. Duke Blackwood's expression soured. Lord Aldrich, this is highly irregular. As is condemning a woman based on incomplete information, Aldrich replied. He pulled out a leather portfolio. I've had investigators looking into the claims about Lady Lyra's supposed barrenness. What they found is illuminating. Kieran leaned forward. Proceed. First, regarding Lord Garrett of House Pinehurst, Lady Lyra's former mate, Aldrich began. He has indeed remarried twice since casting Lady Lyra aside. Neither marriage has produced children. His brother mated for 8 years. No children. Their cousin mated thrice. No children. Gasps echoed through the throne room. Lyra felt the world spinning. Furthermore, Aldrich continued, we found records of payments from Duke Blackwood's personal accounts to Lord Garrett, beginning shortly after Lady Lyra's bond was dissolved. Regular payments marked for services rendered. Lies! Duke Blackwood snarled. You dare? I dare present evidence. Aldrich said calmly. He pulled out more documents. We also have testimony from a healer who treated Lord Garrett years ago. Under truth compulsion, she confirmed that she informed him of likely fertility issues common to the Pinehurst line. He threatened her into silence. The throne room exploded. Nobles shouted in outrage. Common folk jeered, and through it all, Lyra stood frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. Lord Garrett of House Pinehurst! Kieran commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Step forward! From among the nobles, a man emerged. Lyra's former mate looked older than she remembered, his once handsome face marked by dissipation. He couldn't meet her eyes. Is this testimony accurate? Kieran demanded. Garrett's shoulders slumped. The healers said it was possible. The Pinehurst curse, they called it. But I couldn't accept it. So you blamed your wife instead? It was easier, Garrett admitted, his voice barely audible. And when Duke Blackwood offered gold to ensure she never rose above her station, I took it. 5 years, Lyra whispered, finding her voice at last. 5 years, I believed I was broken. Garrett finally looked at her, and she saw something she'd never expected. Shame. I'm sorry, he said quietly. It was cruel and wrong. I destroyed you to save my own pride. You destroyed me, Lyra repeated, years of pain crystallizing into cold fury. Made me believe I was worthless. And for what? Gold? Your reputation? Yes. he said simply. I have no excuse. Duke Blackwood. Kieran's voice was deadly calm. You conspired to destroy an innocent woman's life for political gain. You corrupted these sacred trials with lies. You have betrayed every principle of nobility. I acted in the kingdom's best interests, Blackwood declared defiantly. An Omega Queen would weaken us. An Omega Queen stands before you with more integrity than you've shown in your entire life, Kieran interrupted. Guards, arrest him for conspiracy, corruption, and treason. As Blackwood was dragged away protesting, Lyra felt something fundamental shift inside her. The shame she'd carried for so long began to crumble, replaced by a burning mixture of rage and liberation. My lords and ladies, she said, her voice carrying clearly despite her emotional turmoil. I stand before you, having been lied to, conspired against, and nearly destroyed by those who feared what I represented. But I also stand before you, unbroken. She looked around the throne room, meeting eyes both sympathetic and hostile. Duke Blackwood was right about one thing. I cannot promise you heirs, not because I'm barren, but because fertility is never guaranteed, regardless of cruel lies. What I can promise is this. I will be a queen who values truth over comfortable lies, justice over tradition, compassion over cruelty. And if the gods see fit to bless me with children, I will raise them to do the same. Furthermore, she continued, her voice gaining strength, I call for immediate investigation into all noble fertility claims. How many other women have been cast aside based on lies? How many lives destroyed to protect male pride? This systematic cruelty ends now. The crowd erupted in approval, even many nobles nodding agreement. The evidence was too damning to deny. Lord Pemberton stood slowly. In light of these revelations, I move to confirm Lady Lyra as our queen. The trials were passed, the deception exposed. She has proven herself worthy. One by one, the other council members stood in agreement. The council unanimously confirms Lady Lyra as queen of this realm, Lord Aldrich announced formally. Long may she reign. The cheers were deafening, but Lyra barely heard them. She was looking at Garrett, who stood abandoned by his fellow nobles, finally facing the consequences of his lies. Lord Garrett, she said, her voice cutting through the celebration. You destroyed 5 years of my life, nearly destroyed all of it. What would you have me do with you? He looked up, surprised by the question. I expect punishment. I deserve it. Yes, you do, Lyra agreed, but punishment alone changes nothing. Instead, you will spend the next 5 years, one for each year you stole from me, working to help women you and others like you have wronged. You will use your wealth to establish sanctuaries for cast-aside women. You will publicly acknowledge your lies and the lies of your family. You will make amends not through suffering, but through service. Yes, Your Majesty, Garrett said, something like relief in his voice. It's more than I deserve. It's a chance to be better than you were. Lyra corrected, don't waste it. As guards led him away to begin his sentence of service, Kieran took Lyra's hand, raising it high. Lords and ladies, I present Queen Lyra Blackthorn, proven worthy not by birth, but by character, not by lies, but by truth. Long live the Queen! Long live the Queen! The crowd roared back. But Lyra barely heard them. She was thinking of all the women like her, cast aside based on lies, living in shame that was never theirs to bear. Tomorrow, she would begin the work of finding them, helping them, showing them the truth. Tonight, though, she simply stood with her mate and let the truth wash over her. She was not broken. She had never been broken. She had been lied to by those who feared her strength. And now, finally, she was free. 3 months after her coronation, Queen Lyra stood before the grand doors of what would become the first Phoenix House. The former summer palace had been transformed into a sanctuary for women cast aside as barren, its rooms converted into living quarters, workspaces, and healing chambers. "Your Majesty!" Lady Meredith approached, now serving as Lyra's chief advisor with surprising competence. "The first residents have arrived." 23 women stood in the courtyard, ranging in age from barely 20 to past 60. Each carried the same haunted look Lyra recognized from her own mirror, the weight of shame that wasn't theirs to bear. "Welcome," Lyra said, descending to meet them, not as queen, but as fellow survivor. "I know you're frightened. I know you feel worthless. I know because I've been where you are." An older woman stepped forward hesitantly. "Your Majesty, we heard, is it true, about the Pinehurst curse, about the lies?" "Every word," Lyra confirmed. "I spent 5 years believing I was barren. My former mate knew the truth, but blamed me to protect his pride. And I'm learning this deception is widespread throughout the nobility." She gestured to Lord Marcus, who had taken on the role of royal investigator with enthusiasm. "Lord Marcus has already documented 17 similar cases. Noble bloodlines with known fertility issues. But always, the women are blamed." 17? A younger woman gasped. "That we've found so far," Marcus corrected. "I suspect there are hundreds, possibly thousands over the generations." The women looked at each other with dawning hope and rage in equal measure. "Phoenix House isn't just a sanctuary," Lyra continued. "It's a place of truth and transformation. Here, you'll have access to healers who will give you honest answers about your health. You'll learn trades, skills, find new purposes beyond the role you were told you failed at. Most importantly, you'll learn that your worth was never determined by your womb." As Lady Meredith led the women inside for orientation, Lord Aldrich approached. "Your Majesty, we have a situation. Duke Blackwood is demanding a final statement before his exile begins tomorrow." "Let him speak," Lyra decided. "In open court, let everyone hear what he has to say." The throne room was packed for Blackwood's final appearance. He stood in